Imagine stepping into a world where the odds are stacked against you. A place where privilege decides who belongs and who doesn't. Now, picture a young man, brilliant, disciplined, but underestimated, walking into that world with nothing but his intelligence, resilience, and a past filled with lessons from the toughest streets. They thought he was just another scholarship kid. They had no idea they had just met their reckoning. This is the story of Ethan, a student who didn't just fight back against discrimination but outsmarted an entire system designed to keep him down. It's about justice served, about a bully getting exactly what he deserved, and about the kind of victory that doesn't just humiliate an opponent but changes the game entirely. If you love stories where the underdog rises, where karma hits harder than a right hook, and where intelligence beats arrogance every single time, then you won't want to miss this one. Hit that like button if you believe in standing up for what's right. Drop a comment and tell us, have you ever seen justice served like this? And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us all, the smartest move always wins in the end. When Ethan first stepped onto the prestigious campus of Winston University, he thought his biggest challenge would be mastering advanced calculus. With a full-ride scholarship and years of hard work behind him, he had earned his place. But some of his classmates didn't see it that way. To them, Ethan wasn't just a new student, he was an outsider. The trouble started almost immediately. As he walked through the campus gates, carrying a worn leather backpack his mother had saved up to buy, he heard whispers. "Must be lost," one student muttered. "Community college is downtown." Others smirked, their designer shoes clicking against the marble floors. Ethan kept walking, his shoulders squared, head high. He had been through worse. Growing up in a tough Chicago neighborhood had taught Ethan an important lesson: sometimes, the best strategy is to let people underestimate you. What his classmates didn't know was that before he became a straight-A student, he had spent years training in martial arts, competing in national tournaments, and mastering not just academics, but discipline and patience. The real test wouldn't be in the classroom, it would be in how he handled the obstacles these privileged students threw his way. Ethan didn't just come to Winston to survive. He came to succeed. And while they saw a scholarship kid, they had no idea they had just met someone who was about to change everything. Winston University prided itself on tradition. To outsiders, it was a picture of academic excellence, red brick buildings, sprawling green lawns, and generations of well-connected families passing through its gates. But beneath the polished image lay an unspoken rule: some students belonged more than others. For decades, certain fraternities, including Beta Theta, had operated like private clubs for the privileged. Sons of senators, CEOs, and Wall Street executives filled their ranks, continuing the same cycles of wealth and influence. While the university publicly championed diversity, students like Ethan, young, gifted, and from working-class backgrounds, were often made to feel like uninvited guests. Chad Worthington, the golden boy of Beta Theta, was part of that system. From the moment Ethan arrived, Chad saw him as a threat. A student on a full scholarship? A kid from the south side of Chicago outscoring legacy students in physics? That was unacceptable. So, Chad and his fraternity brothers set out to put Ethan in his place. It started with whispers and insults, carefully delivered where professors wouldn't hear. Then came the tradition, a so-called initiation where new students had to prove they belonged. Ethan recognized it for what it was, an old-school form of bullying disguised as camaraderie. He refused to engage, but Chad wasn't done. Behind the scenes, Chad and his fraternity had another secret. They weren't just bullying students, they were running an academic fraud operation. Wealthy students paid them to write papers, take exams, and guarantee grades that would keep their family names untarnished. It was a well-oiled machine, passed down like a family heirloom, and Ethan's presence threatened to expose their entire system. When intimidation didn't work, Chad tried something more underhanded. He and his brothers spread rumors that Ethan had cheated on his entrance exams, creating fake social media accounts to make it look like he wasn't as brilliant as his record showed. They hoped to discredit him before he could challenge them. But what Chad didn't realize was that Ethan wasn't just another scholarship student trying to keep his head down. He was watching, documenting, and preparing his own strategy. While they relied on their wealth and influence, Ethan relied on something they underestimated: his resilience, intelligence, and the simple power of the truth. And soon, that truth would shake Winston University to its core. Ethan had spent his entire life overcoming obstacles, and he wasn't about to let a group of entitled students dictate his future. He had learned from an early age that brute force wasn't always the best response, strategy was. And in this game, Chad and his fraternity brothers had no idea who they were up against. The first rule Ethan had learned about handling bullies was simple: let them believe they're in control. So, when Chad and his crew whispered insults, spread rumors, and tried to intimidate him, Ethan remained calm. He didn't react in anger or frustration. Instead, he started gathering evidence. He recorded conversations, capturing every slur, every threat, and every smug remark they made when they thought no one was listening. He kept a folder of screenshots showing how Chad's fraternity was running its cheating ring, where wealthy students paid for guaranteed grades. He tracked their patterns, noting who was involved, how the money was exchanged, and even the professors unknowingly caught in the middle. But Ethan wasn't the only one paying attention. Jessica, the student journalist, had been investigating discrimination at Winston for months. When she overheard Chad's group harassing Ethan, she knew she had found her next big story. She started recording too, collecting testimonies from other students who had been bullied, pressured, or even forced out of the school. Then there was Miguel, another student targeted by Chad and his fraternity. While they saw him as just another victim, Miguel had been quietly gathering his own proof, screenshots of group chats where Chad and his friends bragged about their scheme. With all this evidence in hand, Ethan waited for the right moment. The tension in the campus gym was thick. Students had gathered around the boxing ring, their eyes shifting between Chad and Ethan. This was no ordinary match, it was a spectacle, a moment of reckoning. For Chad, it was supposed to be the final humiliation for the scholarship kid. For Ethan, it was just another test, one he had been preparing for his whole life. Chad, with his privileged upbringing, had been trained by some of the best boxing coaches money could buy. He had state-level titles, designer gloves, and the arrogance of someone who had never truly been challenged. But what he didn't know was that Ethan had been training since he was 12, not just in boxing, but in multiple martial arts disciplines. He had fought in tournaments where winning meant more than a trophy, it meant survival. "Let's make this interesting," Chad smirked, stretching his arms. "Winner gets respect. Loser? Well, losers know where they belong." His fraternity brothers laughed, confident in their champion. Ethan simply nodded. No trash talk, no bravado, just focus. As the bell rang, Chad came in swinging, launching a textbook right hook. It was fast, powerful. But Ethan wasn't there. He had already stepped to the side, fluid as water, letting Chad's punch cut through empty air. The crowd murmured. Chad tried again, throwing a jab, then a cross. Ethan moved effortlessly, dodging each attack without breaking a sweat. For Chad, boxing had always been about brute force, about looking good in front of a crowd. But for Ethan, it was about precision, patience, and control. And then it happened. Chad overcommit, throwing a wild haymaker out of frustration. That's when Ethan struck, fast, clean, and devastating. A single counterpunch to Chad's ribs knocked the wind out of him, making him stumble. Before he could recover, Ethan stepped in with a sweeping leg kick, sending Chad flat on his back. The gym fell silent for a moment. Then, a wave of murmurs, gasps, and whispers swept through the crowd. Chad, the golden boy of Winston, had just been floored. Miguel, the student Chad had bullied before, pulled out his phone and live-streamed the scene. Within minutes, videos flooded social media, and the whole campus was watching the downfall of the university's biggest bully. Ethan didn't celebrate. He didn't gloat. He simply stepped back and let the moment sink in. Because he knew this wasn't just about a fight. This was about proving that bullies, no matter how powerful they think they are, always fall when they meet someone who refuses to back down. For Chad, losing the fight in the gym was just the beginning of his problems. The real battle, the one he never saw coming, was about to unfold in classrooms, faculty offices, and the university's administration boardroom. Ethan hadn't just beaten Chad physically, he had dismantled the very foundation of Chad's privilege. The day after the fight, Ethan walked into the cafeteria and noticed something different. Chad and his fraternity brothers were huddled around their phones, whispering. He checked his own phone and saw why. Social media was flooded with videos of the fight, but that wasn't the real story. The real story was the evidence Ethan had just sent to Professor Martinez and the university's disciplinary committee. Every screenshot, every recorded conversation, every fraudulent transaction linked to Chad's fraternity's cheating ring was now in the hands of the people who could actually do something about it. By noon, an emergency faculty meeting was called. Winston University had a reputation to protect, and this scandal threatened to expose a culture of academic fraud that had gone unchecked for years. Professors were furious, students were talking, and local news outlets were already sniffing around. Chad, of course, tried to fight back. He confronted Ethan in the computer lab, his usual smugness replaced with pure desperation. "You think this is over?" Chad hissed. "My father is on the board. One phone call, and you're gone." Ethan didn't flinch. Instead, he calmly pulled up his laptop screen, showing an email he had just sent to the university chancellor. "Funny," Ethan said, "because I just sent the administration a full report. And guess what? Turns out faculty members don't like being part of a scandal." That's when Chad made his biggest mistake. He reached for Ethan's laptop, trying to delete the files himself. What he forgot, however, was that the lab had security cameras. "Got that on camera," a voice said from across the room. Amy, the quiet lab assistant, held up her phone. "You just tried to destroy university property." For the first time, Chad looked genuinely afraid. Within days, the university launched a full investigation into Beta Theta's activities. What started as an academic fraud case quickly unraveled into something much bigger. Alumni donations, backdoor admissions deals, and decades of corruption were coming to light. Chad's fraternity was immediately suspended, and multiple students, some of whom had been paying thousands of dollars to cheat, were expelled. Chad, as the ringleader, faced the harshest consequences. His father, who had always been able to smooth over his son's mistakes, found himself powerless against a scandal too big to cover up. The final blow came when Jessica, the student journalist, published her article. It wasn't just about Chad's cheating ring, it was about Winston University's long history of discrimination and favoritism. The student body, once silent, now had a voice. Protests began. Committees were formed to investigate past wrongdoings. As for Chad, he wasn't expelled outright, but he might as well have been. His father resigned from the board under pressure. His fraternity abandoned him. He was forced to face something he had never experienced before: accountability. For the first time, he had to do his own work, take his own tests, and earn his own grades. And maybe, Just maybe, that was the real punishment, learning what it meant to actually prove himself. Ethan, on the other hand, never looked back. He didn't need revenge. His victory wasn't about taking Chad down, it was about proving that integrity, intelligence, and resilience could beat privilege any day. And that was a lesson that no amount of money could erase. Life is a way of testing us, often in ways we least expect. Ethan's journey at Winston University wasn't just about standing up to bullies, it was about proving that character, intelligence, and perseverance matter more than privilege. One of the most powerful lessons from his story is that strength isn't just physical. True strength lies in knowing when to fight and when to outthink your opponent. Ethan didn't just react with anger, he gathered evidence, built alliances, and used truth as his greatest weapon. In a world where deception can sometimes seem like the easy path, his story reminds us that honesty and preparation always win in the end. Another lesson is the power of resilience. Many of us have faced situations where we were underestimated or unfairly treated. But like Ethan, the key isn't to give in to bitterness, it's to stay focused on what truly matters. He didn't let his adversaries define him, instead, he turned their hostility into motivation, proving that dignity and hard work will always triumph over entitlement. Lastly, change starts with one person willing to take a stand. Ethan's courage inspired others, showing that when one person dares to challenge the status quo, others will follow. It's a reminder that no matter our age or stage in life, we always have the power to stand up for what's right, and sometimes, that's all it takes to make a difference.